Welcome to the War Archive, where wars become stories. At 11:47 p.m. in Tehran, the night did not gradually fracture. It detonated. Windows rattled across the capital as simultaneous impacts lit the horizon from north to south. In Karaj, industrial complexes burned. In Isfahan, flashes erupted near fortified nuclear facilities. And in the political heart of the city, near University Street in Pasteur, explosions struck within blocks of the Supreme Leader's compound. There was no warning shot, no gradual escalation. Missiles and guided bombs landed within the same narrow second, a synchronized convergence designed not just to destroy targets, but to overload the regime's ability to respond. To those on the ground, it felt like the sky had collapsed all at once. Within minutes, Israeli officials referred to the operation as Roar of the Lion. In Washington, it carried another name, Operation Epic Fury. But titles mattered less than intent. This was not symbolic retaliation. This was preemptive decapitation. Initial reports spiraled into contradiction. Some sources claimed the Supreme Leader had been inside his compound at the moment of impact. Iranian officials insisted he was not present. Then came whispers of confirmation, followed by denial. Across the Middle East, governments paused, radar screens glowing, waiting to see if the head of the Islamic Republic had just been removed in a single calculated strike. But the operation was not limited to one man. Missile sites in Kermanshah were hit before operators could power their systems. Aerospace hubs in Karaj were torn apart. The ideological stronghold of Qom trembled under precision bombardment. This was a systemic shock, engineered to blind, paralyze, and destabilize in one synchronized heartbeat. And at the center of it was a doctrine rarely discussed outside military circles, a concept known as time on target. The coordinates told the real story. University Street, the Jamhuri district, the zone around Pasteur Street. These are not random intersections in Tehran. They form the administrative bloodstream of the Islamic Republic, where senior clerics, intelligence chiefs, and political decision-makers operate within tightly layered security. Striking this district was not about spectacle, it was about severing command. Israeli officials framed the assault as a necessary preemptive act, arguing that Iran's missile and nuclear programs had reached a threshold where delay only strengthened deterrence. American planners emphasized degrading military capability and reducing ballistic missile reach. But the alignment of targets revealed a deeper objective: collapse the regime's center of gravity in a single, synchronized blow. If the Supreme Leader had been killed, succession would ignite instantly. The assembly of experts, the Revolutionary Guard, senior clerics, each faction would maneuver for continuity or control. In authoritarian systems, the perception of invulnerability often matters as much as actual power. Shatter that perception, and cracks can widen quickly. If he survived, the strike would transform into something else entirely, an existential confrontation. Survival would embolden retaliation, framing the assault as proof of external aggression. Either outcome destabilized equilibrium. Decapitation creates vacuum. Failed decapitation creates fury. This is why the operation extended far beyond Tehran's political core. Simultaneous strikes against missile sites and industrial hubs ensured that even if leadership survived, the instruments of retaliation would be degraded. The goal was layered paralysis, leadership shock, defensive blindness, and infrastructural disruption unfolding in the same instant. To accomplish that level of systemic disruption, planners did not rely on chaos. They relied on sequence, a three-wave design engineered to dismantle Iran's defenses layer by layer. Behind the synchronized explosions was a structure refined through months of planning. The assault was divided into 3 deliberate waves, each targeting a different layer of Iran's defensive architecture. This was not random bombardment. It was dismantling by design. The first wave focused on blinding the system. Radar installations, surface-to-air missile batteries, and air defense headquarters in Tehran, Elam, and Qazvin were marked for immediate suppression. Without detection and coordination, even advanced missile networks struggle to function. Neutralize the eyes, and the rest of the body falters. The second wave aimed at Iran's ballistic missile infrastructure. Launch sites in regions like Kermanshah were targeted before operators could fully activate their systems. Missile convoys, storage depots, and secondary command nodes were prioritized to prevent organized retaliation. The objective was to cut the arm before it could swing. The third wave struck deeper: aerospace hubs in Karaj, military manufacturing complexes, and the fortified nuclear facilities in Isfahan. These were strategic pillars, not tactical assets. By targeting production capability and hardened infrastructure, planners sought to degrade Iran's long-term deterrent capacity, not just its immediate response. Each phase overlapped intentionally. While air defenses were being suppressed, missile sites were already being hit. While missile convoys scrambled, industrial nodes were lighting up. The tempo denied recovery time, compressing reaction windows to seconds. But structure alone does not deliver reach. To execute a synchronized, multi-layered assault across such distances required something more: platforms capable of projecting power from every direction at once. And days before the first impact in Tehran, those platforms were already moving into place. Days before the first explosion lit the Iranian sky, steel hulls were already shifting quietly into position. In the Arabian Sea, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group maneuvered within striking distance of Iran's southern coastline. To the west, in the eastern Mediterranean, the USS Gerald R. Ford, the newest and most technologically advanced carrier in the American fleet, tightened the geometry from another vector. These were not mere ships. They were floating cities of air power. Each carrier carried a layered ecosystem of force: guided missile destroyers, cruisers, submarines operating unseen beneath the surface. Vertical launch system cells sat loaded with Tomahawk cruise missiles. Flight decks were packed with F/A-18 Super Hornets, F-35C, Lightning II fighters, electronic warfare aircraft, and airborne command platforms. Thousands of personnel operated within a single mobile battle space. From the south, missiles could arc toward coastal infrastructure and air defense nodes. From the west, aircraft could compress reaction time across central Iran. The encirclement was subtle but decisive, a tightening ring that reduced Iran's strategic depth. Carrier strike groups are designed for sustained operations, not single strikes. They can launch aircraft every 30 seconds when needed, turning into the wind as catapults cycle rhythmically. That capacity for tempo was critical. A synchronized assault requires the ability not only to hit first, but to keep hitting. While these floating air bases settled into position, Israeli squadrons prepared for a far more delicate maneuver. Their journey would require crossing nearly 1,000 miles of contested airspace, calculating fuel down to the minute. And all of it would have to align perfectly with the doctrine that governed the entire operation: time on target. The explosions over Tehran were not spontaneous. They were timed. Time on target is a doctrine built on precision mathematics, where weapons launched from different platforms at different speeds are calculated to arrive at their objectives within the same second. It is not enough to strike hard. The strike must land everywhere at once. A Tomahawk cruise missile flying subsonic and hugging terrain must be fired long before a precision-guided bomb dropped from altitude. A stealth bomber penetrating deep airspace must factor in wind, refueling windows, and radar exposure. Submarines, destroyers, carriers, land bases. Each platform moves differently, yet all must converge in a synchronized heartbeat. The purpose is systemic shock. When radar sites, missile batteries, command bunkers, leadership compounds, and industrial hubs are hit simultaneously, the enemy cannot prioritize response. There is no sequence to analyze, no single breach to seal. The system collapses under concurrent strain. On February 28th, missiles launched from sea and air were choreographed so that impacts in Karaj, Tehran, Qom, Kermanshah, and Isfahan fell within the same narrow window. Israeli jets released munitions at the exact moment American cruise missiles struck air defense nodes. To those watching from the ground, it felt instantaneous. To planners, it was the culmination of layered timing. But synchronization alone cannot guarantee access. To reach those targets, Iran's air defense network first had to be disoriented. Before the door could be broken open, the eyes guarding it needed to be blinded. And that phase began not with explosions, but with signals. Before the first Tomahawk struck concrete, another battle had already begun, one invisible to the naked eye. Across sea, air, and possibly space-based platforms, electronic warfare systems activated in coordinated bursts. The objective was simple: confuse the sensors before the missiles arrived. Modern air defense networks rely on layered radar grids feeding data into centralized command systems. If that data becomes corrupted or saturated, the network falters. Coalition assets began injecting interference, noise, and false returns into Iranian radar scopes, screens that once displayed clear trajectories, now filled with chaotic signals. Among the most disruptive tools were ADM-160M ALD decoys, small, programmable drones designed to mimic the radar signature of full-sized fighter aircraft. To an Iranian operator staring at a flashing console, dozens of Phantom F-15S or F-16S appeared to be screaming toward the capital. Each blip demanded attention. Each could be real. Under that pressure, defensive systems face a dilemma: fire at everything and risk exhausting capacity, or hesitate and risk letting genuine threats slip through. In moments of saturation, hesitation spreads. Conflicting reports move up the chain of command. Precious seconds disappear. Top-tier systems, including domestically developed Bavar batteries and Russian-supplied platforms, attempted to sort signal from deception. But electronic interference and decoy swarms created distortion at scale. The air defense network did not collapse instantly. It fractured, and that fracture was all planners needed. With the radar picture disoriented and response times compressed, the next layer of the assault moved into position. The door was about to be kicked in, not by aircraft, but by missiles rising silently from the sea. In the Persian Gulf and the northern Arabian Sea, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers received the launch order. Vertical launch system hatches snapped open in disciplined sequence, and Tomahawk land attack missiles erupted upward before banking low toward the Iranian coastline. There was no spectacle, only ignition, guidance correction, and disappearance into the night. These missiles flew subsonic and close to the terrain, hugging valleys and skimming beneath the radar horizon, in what planners call nap of the Earth flight. Pre-programmed with precise coordinates and synchronized arrival times, they threaded through defensive gaps already widened by electronic interference. Their targets were deliberate: S-300 and S-400 radar arrays, command bunkers, integrated air defense nodes. When the first impacts landed, they did more than destroy hardware. They severed links: detection from command, command from launcher. Some radar crews attempted to power systems back online, only to expose themselves to follow-on strikes. Others were caught mid-boot, systems flashing error codes as shockwaves rolled through reinforced walls. The effect was structural. Corridors began to form in the airspace, not empty, but fractured enough to permit penetration. Air defense batteries that had once overlapped in layered coverage now operated in isolation. Coordination gave way to confusion. This was the moment the door gave way. Not metaphorically, but tactically. And through those newly carved gaps, the most advanced aircraft in the coalition inventory began their advance. With radar grids distorted and key nodes shattered by Tomahawks, the airspace above Iran shifted from layered denial to fractured uncertainty. That fracture was narrow, and it would not last long. Into it moved the aircraft designed precisely for this kind of window. Fifth-generation fighters, American and Israeli F-35s and possibly F-22 Raptors, pushed forward with minimal detectable signature. Their sensors scanned for surviving emitters while their profiles remained difficult to track. Any radar bold enough to switch back on became a target within seconds. Anti-radiation missiles locking onto emissions like predators following heat. Minutes behind them, the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers were already deep inside contested airspace. Flying from distant bases and sustained by mid-air refueling, they carried payloads intended for hardened targets, facilities buried under reinforced concrete and earth. In Isfahan, the fortified nuclear and drone complexes became focal points. Precision munitions descended into structures designed to survive conventional bombardment. The sequence was deliberate: electronic warfare disoriented, Tomahawks fractured, stealth aircraft exploited. Each layer relied on the one before it, compressing reaction time further with every passing minute. From the ground, the difference between cruise missile and stealth bomber was academic. What mattered was that critical nodes were being dismantled in rapid succession. The defensive grid no longer functioned as a unified shield. It had become scattered pockets of resistance. But even as stealth aircraft carved through deep targets, another component of the strike package was approaching from far greater distance. Israeli squadrons were racing toward their release points, navigating one of the most complex flight paths of the entire operation, and they had to arrive at the exact second the mathematics demanded. At 9 a.m. local time, more than a dozen Israeli aircraft lifted off, the beginning of a journey measured not just in miles but in margins. The straight-line distance to central Iran ranges between roughly 930 and 1,240 miles each way, depending on routing. But in this theater, there are no straight lines. Every corridor passes through sovereign airspace layered with radar, politics, and risk. To reach their assigned targets, Israeli planners had to either coordinate passage or navigate around the airspace of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Altitude profiles were adjusted to minimize exposure. Electronic masking synchronized with coalition interference. Flight timing was built around refueling windows that could not slip by even minutes. Mid-air refueling became the quiet backbone of the mission. Tanker aircraft established orbit tracks in pre-planned zones, and strike fighters connected in sequence, taking on thousands of pounds of fuel before pressing forward. Each connection extended reach, but also consumed time. The clock governing time on target did not pause. Arrival had to be exact. Too early, and defensive systems might recover. Too late, and the systemic shock would fragment into separate impacts. As stealth bombers struck hardened sites and cruise missiles tore through radar installations, Israeli jets approached their release points with seconds to spare. When their precision-guided munitions fell over Tehran and other strategic zones, they did so in lockstep with American impacts from sea and air. Geography had been overcome by choreography. Distance collapsed into synchronization. Yet the strike package was not designed to end in a single pulse. Shock creates opportunity, but pressure must follow. And as the first wave began to withdraw, a new tempo surged forward to prevent recovery. 30 minutes past H hour, while the first synchronized impacts were still echoing across Iranian cities, the tempo shifted from shock to suppression. From regional bases in Jordan and the UAE, F-15E Strike Eagles surged into the battle space. These aircraft, built for payload and persistence, carried heavy loads of JDAMs and small-diameter bombs, precision weapons designed to hunt mobility, not just infrastructure. Their targets were missile convoys attempting to reposition, transporter erector launchers dispersing into valleys, and secondary command nodes scrambling to reestablish communication. Using advanced targeting pods and ground-scanning radar, Strike Eagles tracked heat signatures and movement patterns in real time. Every detected relocation became a vulnerability. When aircraft ran low on fuel or munitions, they did not exit the theater entirely. Instead, they rendezvoused with tanker aircraft circling along pre-planned tracks. Fuel booms extended, thousands of pounds transferred mid-air. Within minutes, the fighters were turning back toward Iranian airspace for additional passes. The goal was endurance. Deny Iran the opportunity to reorganize. Meanwhile, at sea, carrier strike groups intensified their contribution. F/A-18 Super Hornets launched in steady intervals, armed with anti-radiation missiles tasked with suppressing any surviving radar emissions. Above them, E-2 Hawkeye aircraft orchestrated the crowded sky, coordinating fighters, bombers, tankers, and electronic warfare assets in a constantly shifting aerial network. By sunrise, the first cycle of the assault had transitioned into sustained pressure. Air defense grids were fractured. Missile forces were hunted in motion. Industrial sites smoldered. The coalition had not merely struck, it had imposed tempo. But no operation of this scale ends unchallenged. Tehran still retained ballistic missile stockpiles and drone capacity. And as coalition aircraft cycled through refueling tracks, Iran's retaliation began to materialize. Retaliation did not arrive as a rumor. It arrived as launch plumes. Within hours of the coordinated assault, Tehran announced its counterstrike, Operation Truthful Promise 4. Ballistic missiles were rolled from hardened shelters, drones lifted from concealed pads, and the trajectory of escalation bent outward across the region. American installations quickly moved to high alert. In the United Arab Emirates, Al Dhafra Air Base reported incoming strikes, with at least one fatality caused by shrapnel. In Bahrain, the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet was targeted directly, forcing layered defensive responses. Kuwait locked down its airspace as missile paths crossed regional corridors. Across Israel, sirens pierced the air in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Interceptor batteries responded almost instantly, streaking upward in white arcs against the dark. Mid-air collisions flashed above the skyline, some threats neutralized, others forcing emergency protocols. The sky itself became a second battlefield. Iran's advantage lay in volume. Even with infrastructure damaged, stockpiles remained extensive. Drones complicated the defensive grid further, smaller, slower, and capable of slipping through layered interception systems. The retaliation was not designed for precision spectacle. It was designed for persistence. The synchronized shock that opened the conflict had now evolved into sustained exchange. The question was no longer whether the coalition could strike deep. It was whether the region could absorb what followed without cascading into wider war. And at the center of it all remained the uncertainty that had hung in the air since the first impact. Was the supreme leader dead, or had the strike only hardened the regime's resolve? In the hours that followed, information moved faster than confirmation. Israeli sources suggested success. Iranian officials denied it. Then came controlled footage, carefully staged appearances, and competing narratives designed as much for domestic stability as for international signaling. In modern conflict, perception is another front line. If the supreme leader had been killed in the synchronized assault, succession would not be seamless. Power inside the Islamic Republic is layered: clerical authority, revolutionary guard influence, political councils. Remove the apex and factions recalibrate instantly. Even the appearance of vulnerability can trigger internal tremors. If he survived, the calculus shifts toward consolidation. A leader who withstands an attempted decapitation becomes a symbol of endurance. Retaliation intensifies, framed as defense of sovereignty and faith. In that scenario, the strike does not collapse the regime. It reinforces it. Militarily, the operation achieved its tactical aims in the opening phase. Air defenses degraded, missile infrastructure struck, nuclear facilities damaged, corridors carved through contested skies. The mathematics of time on target worked, the choreography held, but strategy extends beyond the first night. Preemptive strikes can reshape momentum. They cannot guarantee outcome. Carrier groups remain on station. Missile batteries remain alert. The region's airspace hums with surveillance and counter-surveillance. The sky ignited in a single calculated second. A demonstration of modern synchronized warfare at its most precise. What follows may not be as synchronized. It may unfold slowly, unevenly, shaped by politics as much as by firepower. And whether this was decapitation or escalation may only be clear long after the smoke fades.